We are at the halfway point in our No Time for Rest campaign. Our campaign roughly follows the hymn, Come Labor On, which was written by Jane Laurie Borthwick. Last week we started with a sermon entitled, Who Dares Stand Idle?, reminding us that none of us has the luxury of resting on our laurels, and a reminder that congregations especially do not have the luxury of looking over our shoulder at what has been accomplished in days gone by. This week we move on to the second verse of Miss Borthwick's hymn, Come labor on, claim the high calling angels cannot share. Too young and old the gospel gladness bear. Redeem the time, its hours too swiftly fly. The night draws nigh. There is still a sense of urgency, a sense of exigency, a tone of importance and consequence to this mission. And it's happening right now. Redeem the time, this moment, this day. In the prophecy of Jeremiah, we read, build houses and live in them, plant gardens and eat their fruit. Take wives and beget sons and daughters, and take wives for your sons and give your daughters to husbands, that they may bear sons and daughters. Multiply there, do not decrease, and seek the welfare of the city to which I have exiled you, and pray to the Lord in its behalf. For in its prosperity you shall prosper. There's really nothing at all unusual about these words, until you consider to whom and when they were spoken. The people of Israel were in exile. They had been removed from their homeland, their cities, their towns, and they had been taken to live in Babylon. They were living in Babylonian cities with Babylonian neighbors in the midst of a Babylonian culture. Nothing was as it should be. This was not how they had imagined their lives. The call from God comes through the prophet and tells the people of Israel to get on with it, right there and right now. Build houses, plant gardens, celebrate marriages, have children, and seek the welfare of the city to which I have exiled you, and pray to the Lord on its behalf. Here in Babylon? There in Babylon. In the midst of a city that is not perfect? In the midst of a city that is not perfect. Among people who don't believe as we believe? You're catching on. What God was telling the ancient exiled Israelites is the same thing Miss Borthwick tells us in her hymn. Redeem the time. When you go looking for definitions of redeem, you come up with quite a list. To buy back, to repurchase, to get or win back, to free from what distresses or harms, to free from captivity by payment of ransom, to extricate from or to help overcome something detrimental, to release from blame or debt, to free from the consequences of sin, to change for the better, to reform, to repair, to restore. These are the very ideas behind God's words to the people of Israel. Redeem the time. Make better the days in which you are living. In the days of the exile and in our own days, God's people have good news, words of hope, messages of joy to share with all God's people. In ancient days and contemporary times, God's people have a way of justice, love, and peace that comes from God alone, and we have been called to share that good news in word and deed. Long ago and right now, God's people have a better way to offer the world than the one the world is currently pursuing. Redeem the time. this time, right now. Redeem the days in which you are living. Redeem the place in which you are living. Redeem the time. And just in case anyone was tempted to miss it, Jeremiah speaks it clearly. Seek the welfare of the city. If you go back and look at the Hebrew word we translate as welfare, it is the word shalom. Shalom can mean peace, welfare, blessing, everything good, wholeness, tranquility, prosperity, and so much more. One professor I had along the way told us that shalom was far more than the absence of conflict. Shalom was the presence of everything good. This is what God told the Israelites to pray for. Pray and work for shalom. But, and here's the interesting thing, pray and work for the shalom of the city where you are. Pray for the peace, wholeness, and well-being of the very people who took you into exile. Pray for blessing, prosperity, and success on all the people around you, even as you are strangers in a strange land. And while we might think that to be an altruistic command, it's simply good practice and common sense. For in its prosperity you shall prosper. The old saying goes, a rising tide lifts all boats. When the city prospers, when the city is blessed, when the city is moved toward greater wholeness, its people share in that prosperity, blessing, and wholeness. Redeem the time. The blessing of the city is inherent in our ministry plan and our stewardship effort. We are part of downtown Evansville and have been since 1821. We may have moved around the downtown of Evansville for a while, but we've been here, and we have not left for the presumed safety of the suburbs. God has a purpose for us to be right where we are. But ministry has changed over all those years. For the church, it used to be a bit like that baseball field in the movie Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. There used to be a day when people came, whenever the doors of the church were opened. But that day is gone. Now we have to go to where the people are. We are called to a ministry of presence, peace, and prayer in word and action. The church is called to be a servant people, the prophetic voice of God to the people, and a powerful example of community for the people. This is our high calling. God is calling First Presbyterian Church to touch the heart of this community and bless it. God is calling you and me to bring wholeness where there is brokenness, hope where there is despair, courage where there is fear, and joy where there are tears. God is calling this congregation to model for Evansville how people can live together in peace and harmony, all the while enjoying a wild, splendid, and beautiful diversity. God is calling us to redeem the time. God is calling us to free from what distresses or harms, to change for the better, to reform, to repair, to restore the city of Evansville and its people. God is calling us to this holy work. God is calling us to redeem the time. And that means this time. Not the time that was, not even the time that will be. God is calling us to this moment, this time, right now. I told you back in the very first sermon I preached to you as your pastor 17 years ago that there is one indisputable fact upon which people from the east side and the west side and the north side, and even if there is such a thing, a south side, one thing upon which we can all agree, and that is this: when the water goes around the bend in the river at Evansville, it does not come back again. What has been, has been. What will be, will be. All we have is now. Redeem the time. It's ours to swiftly fly.